want the gloves to come off sometimes.
Right. Yeah. I mean, yeah, it could be a mixed bag. I mean, I do think I've mellowed more in my older age
Yeah.
towards things, and by that I mean that I don't. There are things that I don't like, but I don't come out and give like they're used to, and this is insufferable. It's kind of embarrassing to talk about it, but like used to if I didn't like basically if you found out I didn't like something or I found out you liked it and you asked me about it, you weren't getting no, I don't like it. You were getting a whole speech. Sometimes that would blur into like why like especially it's crazy because it was sometimes it was about movies.
Yeah.
You know, he'd say something about a movie, and I'd be like, "Let me tell you why Western culture is breaking down." Like, you'd get that speech based on this one movie. I'm like, "This is why it's failing. This is why we're failing as a society, is
Yeah.
because this kind of stuff is popular." Um, which is so annoying. But that's I get passionate about stuff that I thought was important. It turns out it's not. Like that's the funny part. It's not that important, and that's what's mellowed me. Is I'm just like, well, I think in my older age now. I was telling someone today. Um, they were talking about the new Indiana Jones movie.
Yeah.
I think, and they said they didn't want to see it. I said I didn't want to see it, and they asked kind of my opinion about why. I was like, because everything's dumb nowadays. And I
Yeah.
was like, and people are dumb, and that's why they like to see stuff. But then I paused and I go, but to be fair, I wish I was complacent enough to enjoy things and not be like, this is bad writing.
Yeah. Yeah.
So now, in my older age, I feel like I'm envious of people who can just enjoy something and they don't see plot holes, they don't see bad acting, they don't see bad storytelling,
Yeah.
they don't see all this stuff. I mean, you know, one of the hallmarks of those Indiana Jones movies uh, was that it was never about the object. As a matter of fact, I think in uh, the Last Crusade, you know, the whole thing was him, the father son moment where he just let it go. You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
and yeah, you don't see that kind of arc anymore. Nowadays, it is just about getting the prize.
Yeah.
And then you'll hear so saying something like that. If you were to go back 10 years when I was 26, 25, I'd be like, and that's the problem with culture right there is everyone thinks they got to get something, and it's just this crazy frothing at the mouth, mad dog syndrome that I get. Now I'm just like, it's sad that we don't have those points anymore, but I
Yeah.
don't get tore up about it. I just sort of like, well, like, you can't expect them to tell good stories forever. You just have to kind of move on, you know?
Well, I remember. I guess you've always kind of steered us in the right direction because before we started doing PipeCast, I had been on Zach to do like a podcast or something where we talked about these type of things. Because you and me both are, um, Red Letter Media fans. I think you're the one that turned me on to them. But I remember we'd already started PipeCast, but I remember you saying something to the effect of, but like something to the effect of, if your thing is built on reviewing movies, like that's gonna fade, because those things don't matter.
Right.
Um, and Interesting enough, today I was watching. I didn't see the new Indiana Jones, but I decided to watch their review of it, and it kind of did hit me in the middle of it. I was like, yeah, I mean, why? Like, I get, I mean, they probably get enjoyment out of it, but I'm just kind of like, but these things don't matter anymore. Like I like good stories, and I like thinking about stories and writing and trying to write. But I'm like, but these movies that aren't worth anything, like why do I need to review them or talk about them or
Hmm.
compare them? Like it's just like whatever. Um,
Yeah, I mean, like, I just have the old stuff that I like, I mean, you know, I mean, Jaws is a huge movie. It's 1975, and if you think about Jaws, I mean, like the shark presses the characters into who they are.
Yeah.
But it's not a movie about a shark necessarily.
No.
I mean, like, yeah, on the surface, it's about a shark. But is it? You know? If it was just about a shark, you wouldn't know about USS Indianapolis. You wouldn't know about his fear of the water. You wouldn't know about, through adversity, that he's going to get into that cage and try to save them, even though it does seem like a really horrible situation, a dire situation, Brody. And you wouldn't know that if you weren't, if you just thought only surface level. And I think the people who love movies nowadays, if they were to watch Jaws or another thing, The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, they'd be like, well, that's a movie about a shark, or that's a movie about trying to get $200,000.
Yeah.
That's not what those movies are. Those things push the characters along.
Yeah.
But that's not what makes it interesting.
Well, and I had a realization, because I think you and me both, we kind of watch Jaws every Independence Day. And I had a realization too, is like, I think me and you are kind of stuck in this world where we're annoyed by both sides of the coin. And what I mean by that is, we're annoyed at the people who like Jaws for that surface level, that it's just a shark, right? But then also I'm annoyed with people who are like, well, the real villain is the mayor, and it's like, did you watch that movie? I mean, he kind of is the only villain that I can remember who realizes he's a villain and then tries to redeem himself because he ends up closing it down. Like if you listen to these, people who are like trying to, dissect the movie with this academic idea and like this anti-cap. I'm not saying capitalism is great or bad. I'm just saying a lot of times that's like the agenda that they're coming in it from. They're like, the mayor's the worst person. He left the beaches open so they could make money, and it's like, well, there's a little bit of nuance there. I mean, he was coming from a place of truth. They are a tourist town, and if they did shut down, they would face hard times in the winter. That's not. I mean, he still is kind of a scumbag, but he's not.
But is he though? I mean, like, that's the thing, is like, when you get older, you realize the mayor did exactly what he needed to do for his city.
Yeah.
No one wants a child to die. No one wants a boatman or any of those fishermen or anything to die. That young girl to die. No. But hey, guess what, man? Grizzly bears kill people all the time in national parks, and they don't shut down national parks for it.
Yeah. No.
Is a national park for tourists?
Yeah.
I mean, so all of a sudden, like, you got one shark killing people. It's like, I mean, like, guess what, bro? You get in that ocean, you're rolling dice.
Yeah. I mean,
no one wants any, like, so he had a good realization, but I think it was misplaced for a story in a sense. This is crazy talking about this, but I mean, like, was he a villain ever?
Well, that's the thing, though. It's kind of like you have.
I mean, in a larger picture, I mean, if it was something insane, if they were trying to do a parallel thing where, the shark is really nuclear war, or they're doing some symbolic thing, yeah, maybe like that's what they're trying to get at. But in terms of like the way that story was written, you can't shut down a tourist town for one shark. That's crazy.
I mean, he's the what do they call it? He's not the main antagonist. He's not a villain, but he is an obstacle in the way. In terms of storytelling, he's an obstacle. But that's what makes that movie good, is because, or movies like that, is that the obstacles have validity to them. There's a reason.
Right.
The shark doesn't need a reason to be there, but these external conflicts do have to have a reason to be there.
I mean, the worst villain, I mean, in my opinion, in Jaws, is the guy after the mother puts out a $3,000 bounty for the shark.
Yeah.
And there's a guy on the city council, I think he's a councilman, that says, "Is that in cash or check?" Being flippant about a child dying is the worst person in the movie,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know? And the mayor, like, shuts it down. Like, he's just like, that's between you fishermen and this lady. Like, that's not where the city stands on this. We have other tourism and other things that we have to do as a city. I
Yeah.
mean, he doesn't say anything negative about a child. I mean, he doesn't like the child dying, you know?
It just
And he
it,
allows them to do. I mean, that's a crazy thing. They bring in the Coast Guard for the
yeah.
4th of July with guns. They watch the waters,
Yeah.
and and he allows them to do an autopsy away from the public. I mean, you don't want an autopsy of a child, you know. I mean, he even says all the things he says. I mean, you can misconstrue it as someone saying that they're protecting their political career, but I mean, it's like even me, somebody who's non-political, I'd say, like, yeah, probably shouldn't do an autopsy where there could be a half-digested child in the belly of a beast to
Yeah.
spill out on the docks. That would be pretty horrific, you know. So
Everybody.
let's keep that out of the public eye.
Yeah. Yeah. So I mean, like I said, I think. Oh wait, hold on. Is he? It just hit me. Is he the same actor? No, I was gonna say, is he the same actor who plays the guy who interviews Jack Nicholson in The Shining?
No,
Okay, they're kind of in my head. They're the same
they have
person.
a similar, I think, sensibility, but I don't think they're the same person.
But but like I said, I think you mean you kind of sit in
I
that
mean, if
world.
he did, man, he aged in the best possible way. Like somehow he like grew 10 years younger between 75 and 80.
Yeah, yeah, I- yeah. But see those two guys, and then um, what's his name in The Fog? Um, man, what's that guy's name? That actor. He plays the priest in The Fog.
Now that guy is a real villain.
Yeah, but
Because
that
he
actor.
knew where that gold was. That's a real villain, you know? He allowed all this stuff to happen, knowing full well where that pirate gold was.
Yeah, what's that guy's
So,
name?
you know, I don't know. Scumbag priest, that's what I call him.
He was in that Into the Wild movie. I think.
Oh, he's the old man in that?
Yeah,
Dadgum, he's been around for a long time, huh?
man, I can't. It's like an Irish name, I think. But he those three people remind me of those three actors. I always kind of think of the same person. But but the point I was getting to is that, like I said, we kind of sit in that world where we respect what's happening from a story perspective, but we also like just are annoyed and nauseated by like the over dissection of what these things mean and the misplacement and the like throwing agendas on it. Because like I watch these like I got Shudder and I watch these like I know this isn't about Peter Heinrich. I'm sorry, but I watch these like reviews, like these like the the top movies of the top horror movies of the '80s or whatever. You know those like I think there's like two parts. It's like something like Into Darkness or something. I don't know, but it's talking about all
Okay.
these. And I like to watch them because they're interesting to kind of try to understand how people thought about those at the time. But then what I get annoyed with is you got these young people who are giving their commentary and they're talking about they just over dissect this stuff and like try to find this hidden meaning and I'm like it's not that deep people and especially like the angles that these people are coming from I'm like it's not that deep like just you know there is subtlety and there is an underlying story but it's not that deep it's not you know it's
Well,
not
I understand what you're saying. My final thought on that is pretty straightforward. It's that um, academic criticism from a fiction literary perspective
yeah
has these very specific things to say about these things. Now, if you were to go back to 1980, say
yeah
75 to 80, let's say, and you were to look at the movies that people are trying to give nuance to, what they're really doing is they're defending their ego for something that they liked because they liked it.
Yeah.
Because if you were to talk to the critics or literary critics of the time and be like, what do you think about Friday the 13th? They're like, that's schlock crap.
Yeah.
There's nothing particularly nuanced about it. There are aspects that are interesting, maybe, but
Yeah.
when you're breathing this sort of academic sort of criticism into it to defend your position,
Hmm.
you have to ask yourself the real question: are you defending something that you like for your ego's sake, which is what I feel like a lot of these things are doing?
Yeah.
Because the same people who would have been, really looking at it, and the same people still today. I mean, you go ask a professor what he thinks about this particular movie, and he's a 19th century English critic or whatever. He's going to say it's crap, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
I mean, or an 18th century. I mean, if you talk about someone who likes Nathaniel Hawthorne, they're
Mm.
not, and then they built their career on, that. They're probably not going to be very forgiving about Friday the 13th, Halloween, or whatever. Fast forward, and someone's building their entire like video essay career on horror movies. They're going to be a lot more nuanced, but the argument is for themselves, not necessarily for the piece. Because I feel like that stuff's. I mean, the reason why horror makes money is because it's cheap, and because it's thrilling, and because watching that kind of stuff just it's just something that people are interested in. There might be a deeper meaning in like catharsis or something to it, like when people are like, "Oh, I like that," I like these kind of horror movies or whatever. But is it anything more than that? Is it anything more special? Probably not.
Well, yeah,
You know, and I think that's the thing is people are conflating something that actually has substance with something that's just entertainment. And I think that's the biggest problem today is that once upon a time you could have something that was well written and entertaining, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it has substance. It just means
yeah,
it's entertainment. And I think that's where you probably get frustrated. It's where I get frustrated. Where you're like, "Hey, you're reading in a lot of stuff in here. There's a lot of subtext that I didn't see, but that's because I think you're defending something that you like on a larger scale for your own personal gain and not for what the movie really was." Because
yeah,
then I can tell you right now, no one who made A Nightmare on Elm Street was like, maybe the writer and director might have had some sort of preliminary vision, but ultimately they were like, what if we just made a horror movie about this? We're going to throw in these kind of key ideas like he kills in nightmares based on this article that I read about Asians dying in their sleep because of massive amounts of stress and night terror. And we'll just make a monster out of that. Now that's about as deep as it got. Everything else is just like, and we'll make it teenagers and we'll make them get killed.
yeah, yeah. Wait,
And all the traditional formulas there. I mean, Nightmare on Elm Street is the same. You've got the final girl, you've got all the tropes, and you've got the monster. Same thing with Friday the 13th. Same thing with Halloween. Same thing with etc. You've got the same trope. So it's like, are you really doing something amazing? I would think not.
well, that's what blows my mind is that movies like The Thing that have so much nuance. There's such a story to tell from the paranoia aspect. That how did the critics hate that? You know, like what? Like could they not see past the gore, the body horror to see that underlying message there? That it's so, we see it so clearly.
Well, not to get too political, obviously, but like if you were to look at the um, if you were to take the temperature of the time that, and this is 1981, that Escape from New York was created, and
Hmm.
you were to look at all the things that Lee Van Cleef says, you would think that it is a commentary on ultra conservatism on top of a crumbling liberal society. That's I think it's Lee Van Cleef. He's talking about like red meat being gone, your rights have been stripped away, all this other stuff. But that's the way liberals thought about conservatives back
Yeah.
then. That was a liberal's take on a conservative, like they were critiquing Reaganism.
Yeah. Yeah.
But you look at it today from our perspective, and there's a little bit of a switch where you think that certain aspects of freedom are being stripped away by an oppositional force. It just depends on who you are, where you're at, and what you think is being taken away based on these types of things. When you hear about gun control, which some people think is an absolute freedom, this is not a take on that. I'm just saying it just is, something that people think is an absolute freedom. And you think about the types of politicians that want to strip that away. Once again, it's not a pro-gun, anti-gun. I'm just saying, if you think about that, the conservative take is that it's a freedom to have a right for weaponry.
Yeah.
And it's a liberal position to restrict that or remove that right because of an endangerment or impediment to society. And then you look at their commentary on the Escape from New York, it was the conservatives stripping away that impediment from the liberals. It's just an interesting flip, and that's just the way it is. But if you were to read that now, if you were to watch that now, I think people today would have an absolutely different take on Escape from New York.
Yeah. One, it happens with 1984, depending on where you're at in society, 1984, has a different kind of vibe depending on what's happening when you're reading it, So,
right.
Yeah,
that's from multiple perspectives too, because when it was written, it was really a critique on totalitarianism and a Soviet perspective. And then in the 80s, it would have probably been a critique on conservatism. And then if you were to read it today, it would have been a flip on, and I would assume most people would look at the way things are now and the restrictedness as more of a leftist perspective. And we've seen this with comedians. I've seen a lot of the comedians I liked for a long time.
Yeah.
A lot of them are passed away now, but they were championing against church and conservative ideals because they were more classically conservative in their speech, and they didn't like profanity, they didn't like sex and violence on television. Tipper Gore, who was technically a Democrat, but if you look at them, they had classically conservative ideals at the time, like more of a religious conservatism. She was against that. She was the one that championed ratings on albums and kind of reading into kind of extremism and rock and roll. They had a bunch of hearings with Frank Zappa and Twisted Sister and stuff like that. These are pretty famous things, but that's that was what a lot of the comics that I saw were fighting against, that sort of. Bill Hicks would have fought against it. George Carlin, Patrice O'Neill. Patrice O'Neill probably had the last actual conservative censorship fight on television, destroyed it so much that actually we went into this lull for a period of time where there was almost like we'd finally defeated the last of conservative censorship. And then I think in about 2014 is when liberal censorship sort of showed up in its own way. I mean, and I think people would argue. There's a lot of arguments. These are just takes. I think any type of censorship can be very dangerous. Also, I think I'm a very middle of the road person, but I think when you look at it, you look at the kind of the way it ups and downs, with the way people feel. You'll see a lot of that stuff is from both sides of the house. I feel like a lot of what we see today in terms of they call it cancellation, a lot of that looks like the satanic panic of the 80s to me. That's what it looks like, which is the satanic panic, and that sort of thing was a very conservative effort. And now you have this what I call new morality. It's completely different. It doesn't have a lot to do with God or religion, but this new censorship is kind of on this new morality cusp. Man, this has really got nothing to do with Peter Heinrich, but yeah. We sort of went. I guess this kind of became a pipe chat.
Well, I was going to say, I think in our Gold Block review, we stated that, you can kind of tell when we don't like a blend because we start going off the rails. But I think you can tell if we have strong opinions about a blend because if we really like it or we really hate it, we go off on tangents that are related. It's it's the blends that are kind of like, you know, pretty good where we're kind of like get in, get out, we're done. But if
Mm-hmm.
we really hate it, we're gonna find ways to just stop talking about it. But if we really like it, there's only so much you can say. And in this
Mm-hmm.
instance, with how dour this is, finding out that we're smoking the last of something good, um, it just makes sense to take your mind off of it.
Yeah, I think the best thing is just to not think about it. But yeah, that's kind of a long tangent about like entertainment there for a split second and the way people view things. But like, I mean, I do think that, I'm not sure how we got on censorship necessarily. I guess I just sort of drug us there. But like, but yeah, I do think that you know,
Yeah. Well, I
that's the
mean,
way it is.
when you talked about Escape from New York and those same kind of ideas, you can see those same plot, those same kind of themes in They Live, right? It's like he couldn't get enough of it, so he threw them in They Live. But even They Live is even more kind of, if you look at it from today's perspective, it's the same thing. It feels like it's a flip. Um,
Hmm.
so yeah, it's just one of those things where you're. I heard somebody. Who did I hear say? Oh, I don't know. I saw some kind of person doing some kind of. It was like an interview. I don't know who this person is. I just saw it was kind of like one of those YouTube shorts or TikToks where you don't know the context, other than I know what channel it came from, and so I know it's a channel where they interview people, and it's usually from like a religious stance, a religious viewpoint. But this person was just saying like he's like after years of just watching media, he's like come to realize that you're not gonna miss it, like because everything that comes out is a product of its time, and if you never see it, you're never gonna miss it. If you do see it, doesn't matter. And I say that just because things are a product of their time, but it all depends on when you're viewing them. You know,
Hmm.
like if you are watching They Live when it first came out, you're probably gonna have the same feelings that the director had. But
Hmm.
someone like me who didn't see it till later in like the 2000s, it's kind of like, well, I see it completely different.
Hmm.
Um, like, same with when you're reading in 20, 30, 40 years from now, it may be more like what it originally was intended to be.
Hmm.
Who knows? It's things are a product of their time, but then also the moment that you interact with it has a part to play a lot of
Right.
times. Um,
I saw something the other day. It was about wrestling, and they were critiquing sexism inside like '80s wrestling,
okay.
and how I think they were talking about Miss Elizabeth and Randy Savage, and the
Yeah.
way he behaved around her was so sexist. And I was like, yeah, but he was also a heel. That kind of treatment was super negative. That's the
Yeah.
way it was perceived as super. He wasn't like people think of Randy Savage as awesome, as like a hero, but he played the villain for a very, very long time.
Yeah.
And at the beginning of his WWF, stuff. My point is that like they tried to imbue his personal life with her into what was on stage, so to speak, right?
Yeah.
And separating the character from the person, it gets super complicated because you don't know who they are at an intimate level, so you can't make those judgments. But he was also using that character in a very negative way, so it's kind of weird. It's like they're like, "Yeah, see, this is sexist," and I was like, "Yeah," and he was also the villain. Like,
Well,
that's the bad thing, right? Isn't like I mean, if he's the villain of the show, and wouldn't he exert negative or bad, moments? And he did. So it's kind of like, yeah, I mean, you're kind of observing exactly what is bad,
well, what's funny about that
which
is,
was him being a control freak and him pushing Elizabeth in front of his opponents and all this other crazy stuff. So,
yeah. But I think you're onto something. I don't know how to. I haven't fully figured it out yet, but there's something happening where this new morality that you're talking about, where the because everybody wants to be the villain. I don't know if like people love their anti-heroes now. They love those people who are gray, um, and and people like they like just straight up villains too. However, there's a certain level like it's almost like two different things that are happening. There's like villains in the terms of what the villain's trying to accomplish, and people seem to don't people will ignore that. They're like, oh yeah, he wants to kill half the population. That's okay, whatever. But if that person does something that is kind of pulsing at the moment, whether it be racially motivated or um, sex, gender motivated, whatever that may be. Um, that's kind of like where they stop drawing. That's where they want to draw the line. So
Mhm.
people kind of look back at old stuff and they see a villain doing horrendous things, but they also see the hero doing horrendous things because of the time at which it happened, based on the new morality. And it's like you can't do that. It's you have to realize who was the hero, who was the villain, and you got to realize what at what time and place was this made.
Right.
But I
Well, that's
think
another thing too. Is like anti-heroes don't. There's no such. I haven't seen a legit anti-hero movie in terms of in modern times. Probably since Dread, there really isn't an anti-hero movie that I mean. When people say well, he's an anti-hero, I'm like he's a good guy. I was
yeah,
like, to show you how far away we've come, 1966 is The Good, the Bad, the Ugly. Um, the good being Blondie, Clint Eastwood's character,
yeah,
right? He kills 11 people in that movie. Tuco kills 6, and Angel Eyes, the villain, kills 3 people.
yeah, yeah. Well,
Like it's like so. Who really? Who by vision did the most damage? And that was Blondie, the good guy.
yeah. Well, even we were talking about Escape from New York earlier. Didn't Snake Plissken watch a guy shoot a pregnant woman or something like that? Or
There's a scene where it does appear that they're going to like sexually assault a woman, and he looks at it and then just keeps walking.
yeah, yeah,
I mean, it's not good. It's not a good. But that's a true anti-hero where it's like, well, this really has nothing to do with me, so I'm just going to keep on going. Now that's anti-hero.
yeah,
You know.
yeah,
In the good, the bad, the ugly. If you listen to Tuco's lists of crimes, like they said that he armed robbery, murder, rape, something else, and then they're going to hang him, and then he saves him so he can collect the bounty and go to another town and collect the bounty again. Now that's pretty anti-hero. It's like, well, them trying to kill him ain't got nothing to do with me, but getting that money does.
yeah. What it goes back to like there's always a difference between. I think people try to use good guy and protagonist interchangeably, and that's just not always the case.
To be fair, they did call the movie The Good, the Bad, the Ugly.
Yeah.
And they do, and then most people are like, well, you could decide who's the good, the bad, and the ugly, and that. I'm like, yeah, but they do put the good over Clint Eastwood's face.
Well, yeah, yeah, but a lot a protagonist, is all about perspective, not necessarily motive and intent, and so a protagonist could be a bad guy
Mm-hmm.
or
Well, that's true.
moral or like someone who does immoral things.
Right? Yes.
Yeah. So, um, man, man, Peter
Yeah.
Heinrich,
Kind of went for it. Yeah, it's good stuff. Too bad it's gone.
too bad it's gone. Um, well, all right. Well, that was Peter Heinrich's Dark Strong, the pre 2022 version. If you get your hands on it, smoke it with us while we're sitting here going down memory lane a bit and talking a little bit of pop culture.
Yep.
But we hope you enjoyed this video. We hope you've enjoyed Burly Boy Summer up to this point. We still got a few weeks. I mean, it's going to be every week until I don't know what the week of September 21st, 20th, something like that. So we got a long way. We still got several Burly Boy Summer episodes, even though Burly Boy Summer Vacation is in the past.
Yep.
We still got more Burly Boy action happening. Mainly mixing in codgers with dark fired blends. So that's how we're kind of rounding out this Burly Boy Summer. So get around the campfire, roast some marshmallows, and smoke a dark fired blend.
That's right.
Hopefully you'll survive. I don't know if you might not be walking afterwards. So, but yeah, so that was this blend. We recommend it if you can find it, and maybe one day if we can get our hands on the new version, we'll do a revisit. And kind of do a
revisit 2022 or something.
Yeah. So, but yeah, that's Peter Heinrich's Dark Strong Flake, and we hope you enjoyed it. We'll see you on the next one.
Bye.